Hey guys, we're gonna review a game right now. I want to go and review my favorite game, my favorite chess game ever played. It's the most famous chess game of all time. But if you're a chess fan, I think you need to have this game properly explained to you. It's called the Opera Game by Paul Morphy. And this game was insane because there's multiple facets here. You're the best player in the world, Paul Morphy. In 1858, so keep that in mind. This is 1858, and he's playing all book moves, brilliance, best moves. Like, you have to understand how hard it is to play 98.3% accuracy in 1858. He's playing against two different opponents at an opera house, and he's trying to get this game over with. He's trying to rush out of here. So he starts off with e4. If you want to know the difference between e4 and d4, d4 is for slower, more structural games. If you're trying to knock somebody's head out, you want to go with e4 because your bishop and your queen can come out really quickly, and you're just going to look to knock your opponent's head off, right? E5 is played here. The main point of e5, e4 is to basically just fight for the center. So yeah, knight to f3, and you're attacking the pawn. Our opponent here plays Philidor's defense, which has a lot of negatives because d6's major drawback is you can't actually bring the bishop out. Does anyone know what the better move is here, where you can actually develop a piece and defend e5? Yeah, knight c6, guys. Chat. So knight c6, it's defending while also taking over some crucial squares, sticking with your opening principles, right? Anyway, Philidor's defense is played, and Morphy says, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna open that up right away. I don't want to mess around. I just want to play chess." Something to consider is that e takes d is actually the best move. Pinning idea is basically because now takes here. So bishop takes, queen takes, on an active square, and then when pawn takes back, he no longer has to waste time moving the queen out of the way, and the structure remains sound. Bishop to c4 is threatening mate in one. It's a scholar's mate. The reason why this is so difficult to defend is because after knight to f6, this can be mate very quickly. If you try to defend this, it's m2. So this is met with mate, and then this is also met with mate. So you actually have to defend this threat. And he does do that, right? And then you think Morphy has the opportunity to take on b7. This is the best move in the game. But there is a drawback to playing the best move. Does anybody see it right now? There's a drawback to playing queen b7, and in this position, he famously plays something different that's not the best move, but keeps pieces on the board. What's the drawback of playing queen to b7, guys? Let me know. Queen b4. Listen, it's not awful. Like, queen takes back, bishop checks, and then even bishop d2, and it's not the end of the world. But that's not the kind of game Morphy plays. He wanted to absolutely destroy his opponent. So this is the best move. Queen b4, p7. If you're seeing that knight c3 is played, and you're saying, well, okay, cool, but why not c7? That's why. He defends this move while developing his piece. So this is where things get crazy. Bishop g5. And if you're looking at this position, Paul Morphy has millions of tactics. He has b7 hanging. He has this bishop queen battering ram. He has this pin on the knight. He can castle long. He can castle short. At some point, he can play knight d5. He can do a million things here. The flexibility of this position is what makes it so beautiful. Anything could really happen, and it's impossible to cover something like this. And we have b5. He's basically saying, okay, where do you put your bishop? I want you to notice that you can't actually keep the bishop on this very active diagonal. It's actually impossible to keep the bishop on this diagonal. What would you play here to keep your initiative going? Okay, so I think some people in the chat maybe have analyzed this game before, and maybe it's obvious. Um, because you have so much initiative here, and because you have such a beautiful initiative in this game, right? And notice this bishop here, because it's blocked by the queen, is useless. This knight doesn't have many good squares to go to. These rooks are homed. None of these pieces are really active besides the queen and the knight. So yeah, you can actually play knight b5, which is a brilliant move. After pawn takes back, we have bishop checks on b5, checking the king. And there's a very natural response here, and it's an excellent move, which is knight d7. But I'm not going to lie, fellas. This is where things get absolutely crazy. What would you play in this position? You have a double pin. You're pinning the knight. You're pinning the knight. This queen is active. What do you play here? Yeah, so castle, long castle, castle queen. Those are all the right ideas, friends. You definitely castle queen here because now this knight is pinned, this knight is pinned, and you're doing two things at once. And in chess, anytime you can do two things at once, it's a good show, right? You want to do two things at once. And you only have one move at a time, so make the most of it. Yeah, so rook d8 is the obvious response here because it's the only way to add another defender. But notice this bishop and rook are so congested. Yes, it's a full point of material. You're up a minor piece, minus two pawns, but you're so stuffed and congested in this position. You do not want to be here. I should have asked you guys, but yeah, rook d7 is the right idea here, and there's actually no good way to take here. If knight takes, the queen is hit, so you actually don't want to take with the queen either, because now you're losing the queen, right? Like the bishop's just going to take. So you have to take with the rook. I think it's very obvious how you follow up here, but when you have a pin and you could win an exchange, right? Like, yeah, I can just go ahead and take this rook and win the exchange. Rather than actually just winning the exchange, you should really think to yourself, well, how can I make this position even worse for my opponent? How can I take advantage of this pin? Don't just liquidate right away and try to get that advantage back. The rook d1, and this is actually completely game over. In one last attempt, in one last attempt to save the game, he attacks the queen here. And what this does is it gets rid of this pin on the knight. So now if we go ahead and take too early, the knight can take back, and it's not that great. But bishop d7, and you have to make a decision here on what you're going to take back with. If you take back with the queen, you're going to win the queen, right? Because then rook takes, and it's bishop and a queen versus a bishop knight and rook, which is a confirmed winning endgame for white. So the knight is going to take here. Now, this is probably the most brilliant move in the entire game because believe it or not, it looks like our opponent has survived this position. Notice the knight is defending b8. There's no more pins anywhere, really. There's no more pins. The queen is going to eye down the queen here, and it looks like we've actually survived if you're black. But this is m2. This is m2. Queen b8. And the idea here is very simple. The bishop is blocking this diagonal, and we are in check. Nothing else can block. The king cannot move. The knight has to take. And in this position, despite being down 10 points of material, Paul Morphy wins the game because he has, and you ready for this? Rook to d8. And that's just game over. It's checkmate. The bishop is defending the rook. The rook is blocking off this d7 square. The bishop is blocking off the king's defender, and nothing can take this rook. So look at this position here. This bishop and rook have not moved the entire game, completely useless. This knight can't defend, and this queen is just hanging out on e6, unable to defend. Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable, guys. This is one of the best games ever played.